Hello, and welcome to the allure of fashion and the intrigue of great books. Vive la Revolution! Get ready to travel through historical fiction to French lives and French fashions. Courage isn't having the strength to go on. It's going on when you don't have the strength. I'm your host, Wendy Kendall. I'm a mystery and romance author. The first of my 5 books, Cat Out of the Bag, is available in paperback from harlequin.com and also at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online sites. Cat Out of the Bag, Cat is Catherine Watson, purse designer and sleuth. As Catherine moves from designer bags to body bags, she's uncovering clues to the murder of Bayside's mayor, killed at Catherine's gala fashion event. So, of course, Catherine is compelled to investigate. She matches wits with police officer Jason Holmes and his canine partner, Hobbs. Catherine's rescue cat, Parada, watches all. There's so much fun in this cozy mystery. For those of you wishing to linger in summer, my read for you is my rom-com, Cherry Shakes in the Park. Bryson is training for track and field Olympic trials. Bryson is plagued by mysteries of the heart. His ex, Marta, is back and stars in the acting troupe's weekend show in the park. She stomped on his heart once. Can he trust her with it again? And Marta's co-star, Sonona, charms Bryson over Cherry Shakes in the Park. He's torn between rekindling his past or starting a new flame. Danger escalates during a midsummer night's dalliance at desolate Loon Point. All my books are available at online sites. And please check my website, wendywritesbooks.com, for news, including updates on my Book 6 mystery that's coming soon. Thank you so much to all the readers who've told me how much they enjoyed my books. Now, my guest today is author Debra Borchert, a fabulous author who writes tales of love and redemption in the realm of the paranormal. Oops, that's not right.
It's okay. I thought, did I do paranormal? It's okay.
When I got to paranormal, I thought, what? Actually, Debra Borchert has had many careers: clothing designer, actress, TV show host, spokesperson for high-tech companies, marketing and public relations professional, and technical writer for Fortune 100 companies. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, San Francisco Chronicle, the Christian Science Monitor, and The Writer, among others. Her short stories have been published in anthologies and independently. She is the author of the Chateau de Verzat series, following headstrong and independent women and the 400 loyal families who protect a Loire Valley chateau and vineyard during the French Revolution. A graduate of the Fashion Institute of Technology, Debra weaves her knowledge of textiles and clothing design throughout her historical French fiction. Her work has been honored with a Historical Novel Society Editor's Choice, a Publisher's Weekly Book Life Editor's Pick, and many other 5-star reviews. Welcome, Debra Borchert, in pursuit of fashion and fiction.
Thank you, Wendy. It's wonderful to be here. And you're not kidding that your Cat Out of the Bag is wonderfully fun, because I'm reading it and I just got to the part where a secret letter was discovered. And I love how you weave in all the purses. So I highly recommend it.
Oh, you're so sweet. That's very nice of you. Now, Debra, as a fashionista, I'm interested in, there's a distinct connection between fashion and historical time periods. Now, you write your novels about the time of the French Revolution. Can you tell us an example of an impact between fashion and that time in history?
Yes, well, the French Revolution got its beginning in 1789. And prior to that, all the fashion was courtier. It was very big fashion, huge skirts and very high necklines and lace and gems and pearls and big, huge wigs that were powdered with flour. And people were starving at this time.
Wow.
When the commoners attacked the Bastille, and they started wearing baggy pants. So the fashions began to change. And during the time when all the commoners were imprisoned and then most oftentimes sentenced to the guillotine, women in particular were all their worldly possessions that they were wearing moved. And they had to wear what we would call a slip, but they called them chemise. And they also chopped off all their hair.
Oh.
So when the really terrible part of the French Revolution ended with Robespierre's death in 1794, all the prisoners were let out. And Josephine Bonaparte was one of them. And they started, it was kind of a fashion statement when they just refused to go back to the ancient regime. And they started wearing dresses that looked like chemises. And they also wore red ribbons around their neck in honor of the people who were guillotined. And the women started wearing their hair very short as kind of a mockery that you took my hair. Okay, I kind of like it like this. So it was a great fashion statement, a big, huge change during that time period.
Oh my gosh. Every time I talk with you, Debra, I learn so much. Now, nobody can argue from me that handbags have had an impact on fashion and functionality. I'm determined that they have. Although for carrying items, pockets have not completely disappeared in modern times. Was there anything about pockets and handbags in your fashion background?
Yes. Well, women wore huge voluminous skirts, and they also wore a lot of things tied around their waists. So it was very impractical to carry something outside of it, anything more than, a handkerchief or a fan. So they wore hanging pockets, and they were generally embroidered, and they were worn between the layers of the skirts. So a woman could just tuck her hand in there, and she carried things like smelling salts, which was really a vial of vinegar, which was very important during that time, and maybe a mouchoir. They had little cloisonné boxes about this big, and they would have little cards in there or ways in which they could communicate with their lovers. Uh,
I
and
love
so,
that.
and sometimes they were decorative and worn outside the skirts, but more inside. And after the fashion changed from these huge voluminous skirts to very Grecian-like columns, silhouettes, there was no place to put a pocket. So that was the birth of a handbag because you held it in your hand.
Ah.
Yes. And so, let's fast forward. And there was a time when Diana Vreeland was the editor-in-chief of Vogue.
Oh.
I think it was the late 70s, 80s, around there. And she got the bright idea of making sure that they did a whole issue on pockets until someone reminded her that there were a lot of purse manufacturers who gave advertising dollars to this magazine, and that would not be a good idea. So I think that the handbag has been it's something you use, and you always had to have something like that. And the word purse has been in our lexicon for a long time because it originally meant just a little sack made of either fabric or leather, and you kept your coins in there because money was originally coins, metal. And so the word purse has been around, but it hasn't always meant the same thing. So,
And then
and I do not ever buy pants or skirts or jackets or sweaters without pockets because we all carry cell phones. Well, what do you do with your cell phone if you don't have a pocket? I'm not going to carry my purse around in the house, you know? So,
That's so true.
I've got to get you to write about a fanny pack because I I order my fanny packs from a designer in Los Angeles who fits them to your body so that you don't look like Santa Claus, with this big bump in front of you. It's kind of he calls it a hip bag, and it's very stylish. And so, I think one of your characters has got to have a hip bag.
Oh, okay. Yes, and some mystery connected with it, perhaps. I love that.
Yes, yes.
Very good. All right. Well, continuing along that line, how important are accessories in fashion? And should accessories complement the outfit or provide functionality only?
Give you an example. When I was researching my books, I came upon a huge portrait of Louis the 14th. So that's like two generations before the 16th. And he had this gorgeous blue and white outfit on and silver shoes with red heels. And I thought, fashion, faux pas. But I thought, no, that's got to mean something. So I saw another gorgeous painting of these men dressed really regally, and some of them had red-heeled shoes. And I said, okay, that means something in society. And so I researched it and found out that you were able to wear red-heeled shoes if you had been presented at court.
Oh,
So it wasn't just a fashion statement, it was also a societal statement. And I think that's true today. And, we've probably all heard of Louis, the Bouton red soled shoe and red heeled. And there was a big, legal battle about whether Yves Saint Laurent, who also had a red sole and a red heel on his navy blue pump, used the same thing. And the French courts decided that it could not be trademarked. I wanted to write to that judge and say, well, if it's trademarked, then you'd have to go back to Louis the 14th because he's the one that invented it, not Louis Vuitton.
oh, the little lesson in history for him. Yes.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh,
yeah.
that's fascinating. So yeah, so it designated something and maybe is also a way to sort of flaunt your
Your,
status.
your status in society, and that's still true today with Rolex watches and things like that. So
Interesting point. Well, your Chateau de Verzat series is an amazing read.
oh, thank you.
Amazing. I love it. And it is filled with dynamic characters, vividly living incredible stories. So you have 3 books in the series: Her Own Legacy, Her Own Revolution, and Her Own War. That's your newest, Her Own War. What inspired you to write fiction about France during the French Revolution?
I was in France and learning about the history, and the more I found out, the more intrigued I became about, well, why was the French Revolution so bloody? It's one of the bloodiest in history. And then I compared it to the American Revolution, and we were revolting against a king and paying taxes to the king. But in France, there were 3 levels of society, and there were commoners, and then there was the nobility. And the nobility in history had supported the king and given the king, they fought in battles for the king. And so the king rewarded them with huge tracts of land and beautiful chateau and the ability not to pay taxes. And the king was supported by the church. And the church did not pay taxes, but the commoners had to pay all the taxes, and they had to tithe 10% of their income to the church. So when people were starving and the commoners found out that the nobility was using flour, which could have fed people, to powder their wigs, they were really ticked off, and they were also ticked off that the church was so wealthy. But I don't think it was, like everyday priests were wealthy. It was the really top echelon that was wealthy. And so when the people broke out, they were really, really angry. And I think that's why it was one of the bloodiest in history. So that's kind of why I wanted to experience that through my characters who were common people. And I have a few that were prior nobility, because I think the juxtaposition it demonstrates what they were living through. And it took 3 books.
3 great books. Now,
you.
Genevieve is a breathtaking character. And as I was reading these books, I couldn't wait to turn the page to see what she faces next. Can you tell us more about her and her loyalties to her community, and also her romantic trials and tribulations?
Genevieve was really a character. She was the daughter of the public prosecutor who was responsible for sending thousands of people to their deaths. And she wanted more for herself. So she dressed as a man and she got fake identity papers and took on her persona and attended university as a man until she's uncovered, literally. And she also convinces her father that, women were totally dependent upon men at that time and were not allowed to have careers. They were not allowed to inherit land. They were not allowed to, even if their parents had a shop and the parents died, you were not allowed to run it. So she talks her father into allowing her to clerk in his office. And she is tasked with copying the lists of people's names that are going to be called to be sent to the guillotine. And she recognizes a name. And she hates the guy because he exposed her literally while they were in university. And she believes that he's not a traitor. And so she replaces his name with the name of one already dead. And then she realizes she can probably save 2 people a list. And it's not much, but she did what she could to help other people. And that's just who she is. She thinks with her heart, she acts with her heart, and gets in a lot of trouble.
She does have a warm heart, that is for sure. What challenges do you face describing your story's settings? You go like from vineyard to mansion to brothel. How do you so realistically transport contemporary readers back in time?
I don't think it's a challenge. For me, it's a thrill. Because of my background with fabrics that really played a big part in furnishings. I went to France, and part of it is that I wanted to smell what it smelled like around the Loire Valley, and there's a mud smell, a scent. And to smell the grape must and the grape juice, it's very different. And the bordel, they call them the bordel, it's like a brothel, a bordello, was great fun because an entire research book on this, and it really blew my mind, what happened back then, and I could only put parts of it in my book. But I also watched a lot of French films, and there was a series where they had a bordello, and it rivaled Versailles, but it wasn't quite as good taste. So I had a
Really?
lot of fun taking notes and then using my mind and imagination to create that. So it's not a challenge. It's been a thrill to do.
Well, the settings just leap off the page. And would you, Deborah, treat our listeners to a reading from your series?
Yes, this scene is I'll set it up for you. It takes place in the third book, and our hero Louis used to be a count, and he was imprisoned, and now he's a regular guy. He's a good regular guy. So there's a big difference in what he wore as a courtier and what he wears now as a regular guy. And Joliet was a former courtier. She was a countess, and she now she's been a regular person for quite a few years, and now she has to go back and dress in her old courtier outfits. And they are visiting Josephine Bonaparte. And Josephine Bonaparte was a very lowly noble. I mean, the lowest on the rung, and it was through marriage. And she was constantly trying to be accepted at court. She wanted those red-heeled shoes and never got them. But another fact is that, we all know that Marie Antoinette had a big wardrobe budget, right? Well, Josephine put her to shame.
Ah,
Really well known. So this scene, poor Louis's wife is in an asylum. She was sentenced for 8 months because she dressed as a man, which was against the law, and they shaved her head. So he's desperate to get her out, and he goes with Joliet as a team, and they try to get Josephine to do them a favor to get Genevieve out. So here, this is from her own war. At the end of the room, Josephine lounged on a gray satin chaise, watching the light glitter off her rings. Potted blooming flowers added their fragrance to her abundant rose perfume. The pale blue room had been overly decorated to resemble the Queen's salon at Versailles. She was still trying to be presented at a court that no longer existed. Little wonder why Rose, now Josephine, was in need of funds. The elaborate silver-embroidered silk drapes trimmed in crystal beads screamed for attention. The thick carpet made Louis wobble in his red-heeled shoes, and he longed for his sturdy boots. He breathed deeply, taking on his arrogant courtier stance. He would act as if he cared not, a more powerful negotiating position. He dared not think of Genevieve, for Josephine would detect his soft heart and use it against him, forcing him to offer more. Josephine leaned forward, her breasts straining against her décolletage. Comte de Verzat, Comte de la Garde. She should have greeted Joliet first and had purposefully snubbed her. Joliet smiled demurely, making him think Joliet had won a bargaining chip with this faux pas. He was glad he had her on his side. Louis bowed his stiffest courtier bow. Madame, may I present Madame Pricot, the former Comtesse de Verzat. Countess, how delightful to see you again. Josephine did not rise. If she had respected Versailles protocol, she should have curtsied to Joliet's higher rank. After waiting for that honor which did not arrive, Joliet tilted her head. And you, Madame Bonaparte. Thank you for the cask of Verzat wine. Do you know it's my husband's favorite? Joliet looked appropriately flattered, as if it were not well known that Chateau de Verzat was the finest wine in the country, if not the world. Then I shall send another. Josephine raised her arm, offering her jeweled fingers to Louis. I haven't seen you, Count, since our dalliance at the Latona fountain. As he brushed his lips against her fingers, he noticed a faint, sweet tang of rot on her breath. He had an excellent memory, but no image of Josephine in the Versailles gardens came to him, much less any flirtation. He would have remembered her odor. She brought her slippered feet to the carpet and patted the chaise. Do join me. Ah, I fear my bulk might break such a delicate piece of furniture. After leading Joliet to a sofa opposite Josephine, he lowered himself onto a satin pouf, decorated with fringe and crystals. Waiting to start negotiating would put him in a better position, but he wanted his wife out now. He looked at Joliet, who gave him a tiny shake of her head. Josephine brought her arm along the length of her body as slowly as a cat's purr. You too escaped Madame Guillotine? He would use his courtier charm. You were most lucky. I heard it was only by one day. Her laugh was deep. I have been celebrating ever since. And you, Comtesse? I am Madame Pricot. Joliet's grace was flawless, except for the fingernails she ran along the silver brocade. Louis wondered if Joliet wanted to scratch out Josephine's catty eyes. Geneviève would. He wished she were here. Joliet's voice was crisp. I lived in America arranging the importation of wine and have only just returned. An émigré! Do you not fear the guillotine?
Bravo. Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you. I had fun with those furnishings.
Well, you've said that the devil is in the details in fashion and fiction. Will you please tell us about how you manage that devil when you create fictional characters?
I give him free rein, but I give him no credit. When I was researching some of the atrocities that occurred in the French Revolution, I thought I couldn't dream those up. So that was a given. And what I had to do was give my characters the courage to move beyond that, to deal with what had happened to them and then to move on. And so that was challenging, but also Geneviève, as good-hearted as she is, does illegal things, and those things could have, replacing names on the guillotine list, despite who her father was, could have sent her to the guillotine. And she was imprisoned for dressing as a man, which is kind of silly, but it was pretty bad because women died in prison. So it wasn't such a silly thing for her.
She is such a brave character. She really is.
I wish I had her courage. I don't think she thinks about it, though. She just acts,
Yes, it comes naturally to her. Well,
maybe.
I'm going to take a minute to just talk about take us back more contemporary to some top French designer brands that rose to fame thanks to their handbags. And these are just a few because we've got such a limited time, but starting with Chanel, founded in 1910 by Coco Chanel, this iconic French fashion house has revolutionized the handbag industry by introducing the shoulder strap. As the story goes, in the 1920s, Coco Chanel got tired of having to carry her handbags by hand and decided to design a handbag which could be worn over the shoulder. And she succeeded, designing the popular shoulder bag. Hermes started out in 1837 as a harness workshop in Paris. And over a span of nearly 2 centuries, Hermes has gone on to become one of the most celebrated French handbag brands in the world, renowned globally for its impeccable craftsmanship and, of course, the iconic Birkin and Kelly bags. If you're into handbags, you have likely heard of the Hermes game. This commonly refers to the amount of money you have to pre-spend at Hermes in order to be offered a chance to buy a Birkin or Kelly. You can't really just buy any of those bags by simply walking into a store. Goyard. This French handbag brand evokes mystery and prestige. Founded in 1853 as a continuation of the Maison Martin, a trunk-making business founded by Pierre-François Martin in 1792. It's renowned for its extraordinary craftsmanship and even to this day will not sell online and does not advertise, but nevertheless, one of the most popular French handbag brands. And bringing you into this century, begun in this century, Chloe initially disrupted the fashion landscape by introducing the concept of luxury clothing ready to be worn off the rack. In the early 2000s, they transformed into a top handbag brand. Many handbags, including the now legendary Chloe Paddington bag, quickly became a sensation thanks to a slouchy silhouette and a distinctive oversized padlock. And last, only because I'm out of time, and certainly not least, Dior. Founded in 1947 by Christian Dior, his first collection featured the revolutionary new look, which marked a departure from wartime austerity to go to full skirts, tight waists, and femininity in general. Fashion lovers from all around the world are best know Dior for its iconic Lady Dior. A favorite of Princess Diana, the Lady Dior bag was created in 1995 and features a distinctive quilted pattern called canage, inspired by the Napoleon III chairs that Christian Dior used in his first fashion show in 1947.
How fun.
Now, I know that, Deborah, there's so much that I still want to talk to you about. I have to invite you back for another. Um,
I'd be thrilled.
I have to invite you back, and I know the listeners are going to demand it. One thing that I want to ask you about is I know you love cooking because I've had the pleasure of sampling some, and you have a literary cookbook and culinary tribute to the French Revolution, Soups of Chateau de Verzat. So can you tell us a little about that?
Well, I love making soups, and it's a very integral part of French cuisine. And during the French Revolution, there wasn't a lot of food, and so soups could be made with the available things like French onion soup. And during the French Revolution, all the nobles fled once the commoners started uprising, and they left all their servants without jobs. And so they flooded Paris and there were no jobs there. So the people that were lucky enough to have a fireplace in their lodgings, and lodgings were just maybe a room the size of the ones we're in, and they would take their cauldron of soup out on the street and sell it bowl by bowl for a few sous. And I think that was really the first form of fast food, soup.
Oh, I love that. Deborah, it has been so fantastic to have you on this episode. Any
All my
last
pleasure.
any
All my
last thoughts that you'd like to say about your series or what listeners can look forward to?
I think you'd have a thrilling time because I was thrilled when I wrote it. So enjoy it.
Well, listeners, you definitely want to check out Deborah's website, debraborchert.com, and find out more about her books, this historical time period, recipes, and all kinds of interesting information. Look down at the description of the YouTube episode and you'll see her website. And you're invited to my website, wendywritesbooks.com, to see my books and explore more in fashion and fiction. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much. I forgot to share my images.